They start out like leeches. I was so tired of it. They start out the most popular person in the world, make a lot of money, big house, cars, and everything, end up with penniless. It is conspiracy. Do it on purpose, like leeches. I was so tired of it. They start out the most popular person in the world, make a lot of money, big house, cars, and everything, end up with penniless. It is conspiracy. The Jews do it on purpose.
So this week, tragedy struck. Simone Biles and Riley Gaines got into a big back and forth. Now, you want to talk about psyops. I've been on this story for years, and at this point, I've come to the conclusion the whole transgender debate is a psyop intended to keep people distracted. If you remember, nobody was talking about this. And then all of a sudden, Caitlyn Jenner is on every magazine cover, and all of a sudden, it's the most pressing issue in the nation. Now, this just erupted this week between the two of them, and it went in some really weird directions. Olympic gymnastics champion Simone Biles is going head-to-head with one of the most vocal opponents of transgender girls and women competing in female sports, former college swimmer Riley Gaines. Biles, the most decorated Olympic gymnast in history, called the former college athlete sick and a sore loser in a post on X Friday night. As a college swimmer, Gaines tied for 5th place in a competition with then University of Pennsylvania swimmer Leah Thomas, who is transgender, in 2022. Since then, Gaines has largely built a career as a pundit in conservative media, advocating against trans women competing in female sports, arguing that it is unfair to include them in competition and their inclusion is at times unsafe for other competitors. Gaines, 25, has also built an enormous following on social media with over 1.5 million followers on X, where she regularly lambasts and mocks transgender athletes. Remember, this is an NBC News article. In February, President Donald Trump signed an executive order aiming to prohibit transgender women and girls from competing in female sports. Before that, at least 27 states already had laws, regulations, or policies banning transgender students from participating in sports consistent with their gender identities, according to the Movement Advancement Project, an LGBTQ think tank. All right, so before we go on, I want to just say a few words about Riley Gaines and the career path she's taken or been driven to, because I've seen a lot of this. You've seen this with Chloe Cole as well. I think it's very typical with people who have been victimized by this movement to wind up going and becoming kind of hard right ideologues, because those are the only people who come to protect them and help them when this mob comes for them. Riley Gaines was going to be a dentist. Can she be a dentist now? The liberal class completely drove her out of society. And now, I mean, honestly, her site, I think she's out over her skis, outside of her lane. She's been advocating for keeping transgender women out of women's sports, a position I wholly support. She starts getting into weighing in on the LA riots and weighing in on immigration. You know, stay in your lane, Riley. But I think she's kind of been driven into a position where it's hard to imagine how she's just going to go make a living now that she's made herself such a target. So she commented on this high school baseball team.
LOL. This was like the October 7th of the women's sports world, yes, when they won this game. Yeah.
To be expected when your star player is a boy. You know, they would have us believe that males have no advantage, but I'm sure looking at this picture, you can figure out simply from the height which one of them is the boy without me telling you, right? So yeah, men and women are different. Who knew? So Simone Biles, for some reason, and we'll talk about this, I don't know why she decided to weigh in on this. Riley Gaines, you're truly sick. All of this campaigning because you lost a race. Straight up sore loser. You should be uplifting the trans community and perhaps finding a way to make sports inclusive or creating a new avenue where trans feel safe in sports. Maybe a transgender category in all sports, but instead you bully them. One thing's for sure is no one in sports is safe with you around. Now that's the least crazy thing she said in this exchange. It gets really insane. So Riley Gaines responds, "This is actually so disappointing. It's not my job or the job of any woman to figure out how to include men in our spaces. You can uplift men stealing championships in women's sports with your platform. Men don't belong in women's sports, and I say that with my full chest." And somebody responded, "A trans category in swimming was created. None of the men claiming to be women entered it." And you can see here, swimming World Cup category for transgender athletes canceled after no entries received. So if it's about just wanting to participate, then why would you not go participate? Because this is what a lot of people trying to find a middle ground say, hey, we'll create a trans category. Well, when they try to do that, they don't want to compete in the trans category. For some reason, they want to compete in the category where they seem to have a physical advantage. Now, this is where this is really crazy. In October 2017, Simone Biles tweeted this out. Good thing guys don't compete against girls or he'd take all the gold medals. She tweeted this out. Not only that, she did a video demonstrating the truth of this. Now, I think the music is copyrighted, so we're going to use one of the generic non-copyrighted things. That's the man, obviously. So why on earth would you tweet out that you think that men should be in women's sports when you literally did a funny video demonstrating how the male champion was able to do things that you physically couldn't do, and then tweeted out, well, good thing we don't have to compete with men. Now, we talked a lot in the previous segment about previous segments today about people more in the conservative ecosystem getting paid for their opinions. Maybe it's that, maybe she got paid. She left her team because she was having a mental health crisis. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's some of both, but it gets worse, believe it or not. Bully someone your own size, which would ironically be a male. Wholly self-owned Batman. Loving that by trying to insult Riley, Simone reinforces that men and women are so distinct that they should be different categories. I thought you're saying there's no difference. So why is our body mannish if men should be competing against women? Virgil, this tweet is hilarious. 1, body shames a fellow female athlete. 2, implicitly acknowledges that men and women are different, with males generally being bigger than females. Disregards the fact that Riley is going after men and women's sports. Gold medal in asinine tweeting. Now, this is where it's even crazier. Simone Biles, because she is so muscular, has been body shamed as having a masculine body, so much so she did a whole campaign about body shaming. Simone Biles was bullied about her muscles to the point that she had to do a body positivity ad campaign. Then she has the nerve to say Riley Gaines looks like a man. Like the whole thing is just insane. Stephen Miller, not that Stephen Miller. This is the size of the male she was forced to compete against. There's, I believe Leah Thomas is 6'2". And Riley Gaines, and the subtle hint at body shaming, I'm 5'5". She's 5'5". And here it takes a dark turn, but again, this whole story is very bizarre. And the more you get into it, the more it's just very difficult to ascertain her motives for tweeting these things. She was one of the victims of Larry Nassar. All the horrific sexual abuse Simone Biles witnessed and spoke out against caused by one man, yet believes women should be forced to strip naked in front of men to validate the man's feelings. You know how many gold medals you'd have if your inclusive dream came true? 0. Which she knows. She put out a whole video and tweet saying that. And this is an element that the people who advocate for this never want to get into. Do women not have a right to their own spaces? Like, really? Literally, forget the fairness issue aside. Like, why do women not have that right? And did you really think you could call people who demand that right bigots without it causing enormous backlash? Now, again, I think it's a psyop. I think the intention was to cause the backlash in order to completely discredit the left. And I must say, it's disappointing to me how many people who even have a class and economics analysis have been drawn into this bullshit. It's very hard to find people who have really resisted getting drawn into this on what I would consider the wrong side of it. Taylor Silverman. If Larry Nassar came out as trans, would you want him moved to a women's prison? Riley Gaines quote tweeted it. This is an excellent question for Simone Biles. Yes, it is. So this is a little bit of what Riley herself said about it in a video.
It's like relatively muscular, right? Being an athlete, I would imagine Simone would understand that, but I weigh like 135 pounds, 5'5" of pretty much pure muscle. And again, if anyone would understand that, you would think it's Simone Biles, a woman who has historically been scrutinized for having a very muscular, masculine-looking body. She was scrutinized to the point she did this whole body positivity campaign. Then she has the nerve to say that I look like a man. And not to mention, this is a woman who has been incredibly brave in calling out and witnessing the horrific sexual abuse that she and hundreds of other female gymnasts faced at the hands of one sexual predator, that predator being Larry Nassar. In the same breath, believing that vulnerable women should be forced to strip down naked in front of men in locker rooms so long as it makes the man feel happy. If Larry Nassar came out as trans, would Simone think it's responsible or safe for him to be housed in a women's prison? To be very, very clear, I could care less what Simone Biles says about me. I'm a very secure person. I know I'm on the right side of history. I'm married, so if she wants to say I look like a man, I literally could care less. The most heartbreaking part about this, for me, is the platform that she has and the amount of young girls who look up to her, that she just in a blink of an eye sold out to appear to be virtuous. Yep. What we saw from Simone is the definition of pulling up the ladder behind you. Something people like Megan Rapinoe have also done. I have a feeling that if Simone's inclusive dream came true, she would have 0 Olympic medals and no one would even know who she is. So if she wants to advocate for men and women's sports, by all means, it's America. You get to do that. I get to call you stupid for it, but you get to do that. Maybe in the 28 Olympics, she can compete and pommel horse in the rings. But I am going to keep standing up for women and girls, which is just about the least controversial take on the entire planet. If you can remove yourself from the opinions of the elite, of mainstream media, of Hollywood, of any elected representation, the position that I have taken is the same position that about 90% of Americans have taken, which is that men should not be in women's sports. Simone Biles having internalized misogyny and being a male apologist was certainly not on my 2025 bingo card.
Well said. And to her point, this is what USA Today put out about this. Simone Biles shows her greatness again in standing up for transgender community.
Oh my God.
And this is why people don't trust the media and see it as made up of out of touch elites. Riley Gaines quote tweeted this. She hardly stood up for the trans community, but instead just personally attacked someone who stands up for women and girls. Prepare for an astronomically embarrassing ratio, which indeed the ratio was pretty large, 12,000 comments to 6.7 thousand likes, so about 2 to 1. But okay, so she was off by 10%, but she's almost nailed it. New York Times poll, not Fox News. New York Times poll, liberal New York Times. finds almost 80% of Americans oppose men and women's sports. This is not, Scott Jennings talked about this, that Trump won by taking the 80 side on 80-20 issues. And that's why I say this is a psyop. That's the purpose of these issues. This is why they push these issues front and center in order to make what passes for a left look just completely ridiculous, disgusting, deranged, and out of touch to most people. So that even if they really don't like the economic policies of the Republicans, all right, well, they're not going to make their daughter who likes to play with dump trucks start calling themselves Steve. Okay, it's something. It's something. And to that point, Senate Democrats, this is in a country, 80% of people do not agree with men and women's sports. Senate Democrats block GOP-led bill to ban transgender athletes from women's sports. Senate Democrats voted unanimously, unanimously to block a Republican-led bill. This was March 3rd. Republican-led bill Monday evening that would prohibit federally funded schools from allowing transgender athletes from participating in women's sports. In a party line vote of 51-45, Democrats filibustered the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act introduced by Senator Tommy Tuberville. It fell short of the 60 votes needed to advance, as Democrats dismissed it as a distraction and a cynical political move. Well, the best way to neutralize it as a distraction? Pass it. Pass it. Take the issue off the table by voting for it. It is really amazing because just on the science, on the facts, it's so clearly an insane position. And to get a uniformity among Democrat politicians on this, that the only other issue they are this uniform about is arming Israel. It's amazing. It's amazing because they can't be getting the kind of money to say this that they get to spout their nonsense about Israel. That one, I don't really understand it, honestly, as far as the Democrat politicians. Like, it's obviously such a suicidal position. With Simone Biles, look, man, you're talking about somebody who dropped from her Olympic team on a mental health crisis. Maybe this is a reflection of whatever is going on with her mentally that drove her to do that. Or maybe she's getting paid. Maybe she is getting paid. We say that about a lot of people in the space. We know it happens. It would be very naive just because it was the conservatives who got exposed with the sugar in the soda thing to think that doesn't happen on all sides. So maybe she gets a check to say these things. Maybe it's just virtue signaling. I think this kind of thing, ultimately, whatever the specifics of this are, it is the end product. Michael Parenti talked about this. It is the end product of a decades-long effort to neuter the left and completely channel it into culture war issues that are deeply divisive, unpopular, that would neuter them, disempower them, and keep society distracted, while the people who actually benefit from this system essentially have a free hand while everybody fights about absurdities like this. Boys?
So if she's being
Who you call him boy? Yeah.
If she's being paid, Russell, do you think she's being paid by some deep state operative or a Larry Fink type organization to discredit the left? Or do you think that there's some trans organization that's paying her? Or does it matter?
It's probably Palantir. Probably all goes back to Palantir. It's
probably
all roads lead to Palantir.
Alex Karp's going to be competing against her in the next Olympics. I don't know, because I don't even know if it's that. Like, at this point, I do believe that the deep state is behind this entire conversation. I really believe they plant the cultural provocations. They persuade friendly media to write articles like this. At the very least, I believe that's how it started. I don't think this is a real movement because it just doesn't make any sense. with everything that's happening in society, does this look organic to you? Really? Like America en masse woke up one day and decided, yeah, our infrastructure is falling down. Bridges are collapsing. People are living in poverty. They're working 3 jobs. You know what I'm really worked up about? Trans people and their right to be in women's sports. It doesn't make any sense. It's a psyop.
There was a video that I played on the show before, and I'm sure you've seen it, of Serena Williams being asked by David Letterman if she could compete against a man. And she just flat out says, never. She says that, I'm paraphrasing, but she says, I think she said men and women's tennis are 2 totally different sports.
Right. Yeah.
And that she could never compete against a man. And so that should have ended any of this discussion. Why hasn't that ended this discussion? Which is what I don't get. And someone even brought that up at a congressional hearing saying, well, I think Serena Williams could compete with, and of course she even herself. So I just don't get that this seems so batshit and so ridiculous that the fact that 20% of the people in the country still think that men should be in women's, or biological men. I just hate that we have to use that term. There's other kinds of men, but I thought, how did that?
Like Ricky Gervais said, I'm talking about the old-fashioned kind, the one with the womb.
Yeah, I mean, here we have Serena Williams, who should have ended the discussion, and here we have Simone Biles making this case after she does a video about how women and men can't compete again. So it's the most. It does exactly what Michael Parente said and exactly what you said. It completely discredits the left. This is a big help. This is a big help to the Black Rocks. This is a big help to the Palantir. This is a big help to anybody who wants to make sure workers don't get any power and and unions get. I mean, hey, this is how you discredit them. This is how you make people who joined with Christian Smalls on Staten Island to start the first Amazon union, to never ever want to be associated with people on the left. That's what this accomplishes. That doesn't accomplish anything else.
I think a lot of it is where the money comes from overall. I've been looking a lot at, obviously, the arts community coming from it. I've written a lot about this. I've talked a lot about it. They just had the Tonys, which I didn't even know they were having the Tonys this weekend. That's how much nobody's paying attention to it. And, of course, the real photos that came out of it, the real stand they took, was a guy in a dress with a décolletage with the hairy chest going up on stage, and somebody gave a speech about how we're not going back to the gender binary. Listen, motherfuckers. All right, man. Coming out of the arts, I will give a certain amount of leeway to Bohemia and kind of testing the boundaries. If you talk about Palestine, if you talk about poverty, if you talk about labor, if you talk about unions, you know what? I'll put that stuff in the category of experimental wackiness, okay? But you don't talk about any of that. But part of it is where the money comes from. Where do the grants come from? Where does the financing come from? Who are the foundations? Very often, they are literally the same exact people who fund the Democrats. They're the same exact corporations that fund political campaigns. If you start speaking out about an issue, forget about like Palestine, how many Zionists are Broadway theater producers? They're not going to say shit about that. That, I think, is a big part of it. I think there are certain people who, by temperament, by personality, they want to be progressive. And if you're at a certain level of society, of wealth, of power, of status, these people can really fuck you. You got a lot to lose if you speak out on things that actually matter. So if you're of that kind of temperament where you want to show you're progressive, but you're not allowed to talk about anything real, I think it's easy to channel you into empty virtue signaling about these kinds of absurdities. I think the signaling is the point.
All right, let's go on to the next one. I can't wait to do this next one. But let's do some chats here. What do we got here? Spark. Oh, wait. I think I skipped some here. Medican 1417. All these security measures are very top heavy. The economy goes into hyperinflation or the infrastructure goes completely bust. So too does the surveillance state. Salmon 53. Sorry to hear you've been put through the ringer, Jimmy. See you in Birmingham. All right. You got a fan out there in Birmingham. Okay, what do we got here? Sparky. Autism is overdiagnosed by the autism industrial complex. Real autistic people either live with relatives or are institutionalized. They don't identify themselves as autistic. You sure about that, Sparky? Coffee John, thanks for the $10. St. Pete History Museum has a mummy. Used to smell before they got climate control. LOL. Phil 2284. Everyone should watch Barnum World. It's free on YouTube and a bunch of places. It's a new movie from the people that make Jones Plantation. Thank you, Phil 2284. And
the first place I saw that was when I went to the Forum in Rome.
What's going on?
They have the skeleton of a baby on display, and I was like, "They do that here?"
I hope
I'd never seen it in America. I've never seen that in an American museum.
All right, we will move right on along. All right.